Yes, therefore now we can recognize our distinguished sponsor, Senator Raffy Tulfo.
Good afternoon, Mr. President, my esteemed colleagues. I'm honored to sponsor today the Magna Carta of Filipino seafarers. Magna Carta in layman's language is the Great Charter. It is a very appropriate title for this piece of legislation, the Great Charter for our Filipino seafarers. In the shipping industry, when you say seafarers, you almost always equate it to Filipino seafarers. The country's dominance in this tough and challenging industry on cargo ships began in the 1980s when an organized campaign began to train Filipinos for careers at sea. Employment agencies marketed Filipino seafarers to international shipping companies. An industry of marine colleges emerged to serve the class of strivers seeking the jobs, and government agencies stepped in to manage the deployment. Since then, we have dominated this industry in such a way that Filipino culture could be felt in many international ocean-going vessels. In a New York Times article featuring the life of Filipino seafarers, it showed how both the ship's food and free time remind the sailors of life back home in the Philippines. One night, the men roasted a whole lechon on a spit and feasted on fresh coconuts. On the aft deck, there was a basketball hoop. Basketball, after all, is the unofficial national sport of the Philippines. And during Saturday nights, karaoke in the mess hall could be heard. But life on the vessel is not all beautiful sunsets and serene ocean views. The New York Times article also told the heartbreaking stories of our seafarers. On this first ocean voyage 7 years ago, June Rosel Rioner was sent deep into the bowels of a cargo ship where he shoveled iron ore until his muscles ached, then continued shoveling for a dozen hours more. I cried in my cabin 3 times that month, Mr. Rioner said. Jason Guanyo, 29, the ship's cook, recalled that once on a 2-month voyage from Montenegro to China, he ran up to the bridge to peer through binoculars at the flat rise of a distant island, just for the chance to look at something other than the sea. Their role on global shipping industry, Filipinos like Mr. Yuner and Mr. Guanyo have for decades powered the global shipping industry, helping to move 90% of global trade. And throughout the pandemic, the world's 1.9 million seafarers have played a vital role in keeping ships moving and ensuring critical goods such as food, medical equipment, and vaccines are delivered. In 2022, 489,852 Filipino seafarers were deployed. That makes 25% of the world's seafarers are Filipinos. And with this number comes the incidental benefit that the Philippine economy has obtained from the remittances of our seafarers. In 2019 alone, it was estimated that 519,031 deployed Filipino seafarers remitted $6.5 billion to the Philippines. This is practically 1.7% of the country's GDP that year. Given that we have been deploying seafarers for more than 4 decades already, and they have been dominating the industry, why is there still a need to enact this Magna Carta of seafarers? There are 5 main reasons why we must pass this legislation. A, it is a highly regulated international industry. B, it provides a well-compensated work for highly skilled workers. C, we must protect the viability of the Filipino seafarer in the global shipping industry. D, it will empower government agencies to help our seafarers. And E, the last but not the least, it will inform our seafarers of the rights and duties. Let me explain each one. Highly regulated industry by ILO, MLC, and STCW. First, seafarers are governed by various international conventions, laws, and practices that are particular to sea-based OFWs and not to the land-based OFWs. The Philippines' distinction as the seafaring capital of the world was sustained through its strict compliance to the requirements imposed by the ILO's Maritime Labor Convention, or MLC 2006, an international convention on standard of training, certification, and watchkeeping for seafarers, or STCW. Labor standards under the MLC 2006 created a single coherent instrument embodying as far as possible all up-to-date standards of existing international maritime labor conventions and recommendations, as well as the fundamental principles to be found in other international labor conventions. Further, the convention was designed to secure the widest acceptability among government, ship owners, and seafarers committed to the principles of decent work, that it should be readily undateable, and that it should lend itself to effective implementation and enforcement. Meanwhile, the STCW was created to clarify the standards of competence required, introduce qualification requirements for trainers and assessors, provide effective mechanism for enforcement of its provisions, and allow greater flexibility in the assignment of functions on board ship. The international nature of shipping requires uniform treatment and international standards that are transported to national law and regulation, so that regardless of where the ship and her seafarers may be found, the ship and her seafarers are always subject to the same set of standards with which they must comply. B, well-compensated work for a high-skill set worker. Second, seafaring has become a sought-after profession of choice for most Filipinos, especially those who cannot afford to pursue expensive professional courses. The seafarers pursue a maritime degree, mainly work on board the ship. The profession's uniqueness and peculiarity differs from the land-based OFWs who are educated and trained for land-based jobs, but are unable to find opportunities at home, forcing them to seek for greener pasture abroad. The salary of the messman, the lowest ranked crew, ranged between 78,400 pesos to 140,000 pesos. That is about 10 times our current minimum wage. Imagine this. A few weeks ago, we were discussing kung paano itataas ang minimum wage para sa mga manggagawa natin, na ngayon ay nasa 8,866 pesos hanggang sa 14,820 pesos monthly. Nililimos natin ang taas na 150 pesos sa mga employers. Ang hirap po itawid dahil hindi naman po din kaya ng ibang industriya. Kaya isang malaking oportunidad talaga para sa ating mga kababayan ang maging seafarer. For this reason, seafarers need closer attention from government to promote the continuous employment on board foreign-owned vessels. C, the viability of the Filipino seafarer in the global shipping industry. The Philippines, the Russian Federation, Indonesia, China, and India are the largest suppliers of ratings and officers working on merchant ships. But in recent years, ships have been hiring more seamen from Vietnam, Myanmar, Africa, and China. This is an ongoing concern at this time when the demand for Filipino seafarers are decreasing because of the depressed shipping market, which has resulted to vessel sale, scrapping or layup, coupled with cost-cutting measures of ship owners and crewing costs. Measures must be formulated to address key manpower issues through promotion of careers at sea, enhancement of maritime education and training worldwide, and addressing the retention of seafarers. D, empower government agencies to help our seafarers. Fourth, this bill will be a compass of our government agencies, primarily the very young Department of Migrant Workers. They are still trying to adjust to the new jurisdiction it has. And now, this legislative measure will outline the primary concerns of our seafarers to aid them in helping our seafarers as well as the manning agencies. E, inform our seafarers of their rights. Fifth, as the great charter for our seafarers, this Magna Carta should serve as their map in their journey as seafarers. It will inform them on how to go about with their concerns, how to enforce their rights, and where to go to avail of them. Importante po sa lahat, dapat alam nila ito. Kasi kung hindi, baliwala po ang lahat ng ginagawa natin dito. Now, to address all these, let me go over the important points and key features of the law. The law will cover both domestic and OFW seafarers. While the standards are based on international standards, we provided for a separate section to govern seafarers of domestic shipping, which is found in Chapter 14 and 15. Chapter 3 codifies the basic rights and duties of seafarers based on international laws, standards and practices and conventions. Chapter 7 lays down the terms and conditions of employment. Chapter 8 provides for the accommodation, recreational and sanitation facilities, food and catering in ships. Chapter 9 states the medical care and maritime occupational safety and health standards. The ocean is a dangerous place to work in. In the last 10 years, 1,036 ships have been lost at sea. A mooring rope could snap with enough force to rip off a man's head, or a falling grate could shear off fingers. A large swell breaking over the side could slam a man against pipes or wash him into the sea. There are electrocutions, burns, and appendicitis. The nearest hospital could be hours or even days away by rescue helicopter. This chapter will address these concerns. Chapter 4 cements the protection for women seafarers and promotes and upholds gender equality. This chapter will protect our seafarers against discrimination on the basis of race, sex, gender identity, or expression of religion or political opinion. Of course, the seafarers must also be informed of their corresponding duties, such as outlined in Chapter 5, while Chapter 6 identifies the role and responsibilities of manning agencies, employers, and ship owners. Chapter 10 to 11 provides for the standards and sets the regulation for termination of employment, extension of employment, and disputes resolution. Chapter 12 to 13 outlines the crucial situation of repatriation and reintegration. After our seafarers have served their contract, we must assist them when they must return to their families. And when they are unable to finish their contract, a proper repatriation procedure will protect them from being abandoned overseas. Chapter 16 is crucial as it sets forth the rights of cadets being already part of the seafaring industry and addresses the concerns regarding the development of marine education. To elevate the industry further, Chapter 17 provides for incentives and awards granted to players in the maritime industry. The government's role is outlined in Chapter 18. And finally, to lend teeth to this law, Chapter 19 imposes penalties for violations of this act. This is the general map of the Magna Carta. But the Magna Carta of seafarers is not a novel idea. The Senate has always been an advocate for our seafarers. The first Magna Carta bill was filed during the 13th Congress by Senator Edgardo J. Angara, the father of our esteemed colleague, Senator Sonny Angara. After that, there was a continuous effort throughout the years to push this crucial legislation. In fact, majority of us here now has at one point espoused this piece of legislation. First, Senator Loren Legarda filed their first version of the Magna Carta during the 14th, 15th, 16th, and 17th Congress. The chairman of the Labor Committee, Senator Jinggoy Estrada, filed this version during the 16th Congress. Senator Bong Revilla also filed during the 16th and 18th Congress. The good one, Senator J.B. Ejercito, had several versions during the 16th and 17th Congress. Senator Sonny Angara followed his father's advocacy and filed his version during the 16th, 17th, and 18th Congress. Senator Joel Villanueva did not lose time and filed his version during the 17th and 18th Congress. Senator Nancy Binay also saw the importance of the bill during the 17th and 18th Congress. Senator Risa Hontiveros filed her version during the 17th and 18th Congress. And of course, our dear Senate President Mig Zubiri filed his version during the 18th Congress. Senator Win Gatchalian, Senator Bongo, Senator Cynthia Villar joined in the filing of Senate Bill 2369 during the 18th Congress. And now for the 19th Congress, no less than 14 of us here filed versions of the Magna Carta of Filipino seafarers. Senate President Mig Zubiri, Majority Floor Leader Joel Villanueva, Senate President Pro Tempore Loren Legarda, Senators Jinggoy Estrada, Robin Hood Padilla, Cynthia Villar, Risa Hontiveros, Sonny Angara, Grace Poe, Win Gatchalian, Bong Revilla, Bongo, Bato de la Rosa, Mark Villar, and yours truly. That's a total of 17 senators at one point and up to the present see the need to provide for the institutionalization of the rights that will protect our seafarers. I'm honored to be surrounded by legislators of like and mind who see the value of this legislation. Our seafarers deserve our support and protection. This Magna Carta is a message to our seafarers that we are behind you, a guarantee to the international community that we will comply with the standards set by the relevant conventions, and a command to our government officials to hit the ground running in ensuring that we keep our obligations to these conventions. Thank you very much, Mr. President and my dear colleagues.